Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we are going to be going back to the roots of this channel. If you're a real fan, you know there has been a ton of buzz around a certain movie that was released, and after seeing it for myself, I have to throw my opinion into the mix. So today we are going to be looking at It Ends With Us, particularly analyzing all of the characters, and at the end we're going to discuss what went wrong with the story. In the case that you're not familiar, this is an adapted screenplay of Colleen Hoover's book of the same name. And disclaimer here, I have not read any of Colleen Hoover's books, but I have watched many a video on the plot of them, which I will link down below if you want to watch through those and have a good laugh. And overall, Hoover's collection is pretty controversial among readers due to her poor writing and romanticization of domestic violence and abuse, among other things in her seemingly countless number of books. But I'm not going to focus too much on Colleen Hoover or the drama around the movie or the book itself. I am specifically going to be analyzing the characters and how they are portrayed in the movie. There might be a couple connections back to the book from what I have seen online, but again, I haven't read the book, so just let me know if anything seems off or wrong according to what I've found online about this. I just think after watching the movie, that's as much as I want to get into this, okay? This will be a full spoiler video for the movie, for the plot of this book, and throughout the video we will be talking about very triggering themes such as abuse, domestic violence, sexual assault. So I totally understand if you need to skip this one. I will see you in the next one, no problem. It Ends With Us follows our main character, Lily Blossom Bloom, who owns a flower shop in Boston. While growing up, she witnessed her father regularly abuse her mom, so we are able to understand her experience with domestic violence. As a teenager, she befriends a boy named Atlas, who is kicked out of his home for a similar situation. However, his mom chose her abuser over her own son. After some time, they fall in love as like high school sweethearts, Lady and the Tramp kind of thing. And eventually, we don't really know how much time has passed because the pacing in this movie is atrocious. Atlas ends up taking Lily's virginity, which is something that is way too glorified in this story, which we will talk about later. They part ways, and eventually after Lily's father's funeral, which again, I really don't understand time in this story. Apparently the book Lily is supposed to be about 23, but in the movie she's aged up quite a bit. Like there's even a mention at one point about her biological ticking clock that women have to think about. So I have no idea. I think she's supposed to be around like her mid 30s in the movie, but let's say it's 15 years after she says goodbye to Atlas or whatever. She meets this handsome neurosurgeon named RYLE on the rooftop of his apartment building, who immediately throws a chair when he goes out to the rooftop. So we automatically know about his violent tendencies, which is just the brightest red flag. He's waving that red flag and she just can't see it. She's colorblind. I think she's colorblind. But yes, RYLE gets riled up. And I gotta say, I think Colleen is really giving J.K. Rowling a run for her money on naming her characters. But Lily and RYLE eventually start dating, and now the story follows their relationship and the continuation of the cycle of abuse that Lily is now in herself. As she endures this abuse from RYLE, her old flame Atlas comes back into the story to cause more tension in their situation and basically make it a little bit worse. And then after RYLE sexually assaults her, she runs away back to Atlas, where she then finds out that she's pregnant with RYLE's child. And something I just have to keep in the back of my head that I'll mention a couple times is that these stories are written for a certain demographic of people, because of course here we see that she keeps her abuser's child because babies are precious. Baby life is precious. And on top of that, she allows her abuser to have partial custody of the child because in her experience, her father only abused her mom, never her as the daughter. So of course that's fine. It's fine. What could happen? And the movie ends with Lily saying, "It ends with us." Except it doesn't, because in the movie there's a whole nother scene where she meets back up with Atlas and it's basically alluded that they will continue to date. And they're like 40 years. They're 40 years old at this fucking point in the movie. But of course, we all know that the person you lose your virginity to is the most special person in the world and you should marry them. So there is a lot going on here. And if it sounds messy, it's because it definitely is. The characters themselves are so one-dimensional. I seriously think that the amount of thought that went into these characters ended at naming them. It feels like a very surface level story. And ultimately, I left the theater feeling very underwhelmed. And if you had similar feelings watching the movie or even maybe reading the book, don't worry. There is definitely validity to these feelings about this movie. And so we're going to explore all these characters to understand why it feels this way. But before we get into the main trio's characteristics and faults, I want to take a look at some of the side characters, which are Lily's mother and her best friend, who is also RYLE's younger sister, named Allysa. Although she plays a fairly insignificant role in the movie, Lily's mother does add some important qualities to the story, especially when it comes to forgiveness and the decision that Lily eventually makes to share custody of this child. Reeling it back to the beginning of the movie though, the first thing we see Lily's mother do is she asks Lily to write down 5 things that she loved about her father for his eulogy. During this introductory scene that we get, she also goes as far as saying that her dad loved Lily, which to me is kind of wild. I mean, sure, you could say he loved his daughter in his own way, but abusing the mother of the child that you love, it just isn't love to me. I don't think I can separate those two ideas. It's really just a form of manipulation that abusers use on their victims to maintain control. I believe even in the back half of the movie, Lily asks the question of why didn't you leave? And her mom replies, it was easier to stay. And I'm just going to stop. I'm going to stop her right there. Stop right there, Mama Lily. This is a huge slap in the face to people that are in situations like this that actually depend on their abusers to survive. Lower income households that statistically face more abuse than middle class families most likely, not always, but most likely need to stay with their abusers for some kind of financial security. For example, like having a roof over their head, having a working car, not being able to afford divorce, etc. Saying that it was easier to stay is not only weak character building, but also very lazy writing. If Colleen Hoover and the writers of this movie wanted to strengthen the complexity of this complicated narrative, then create some complicated characters with complicated decisions to make. The movie also negates any kind of semblance for mental health awareness in the entire plot. Like, did Lily's mom ever go to therapy? Lily and her mom could have gone to family counseling together after the fact. Does her mom suffer from PTSD from all of the stuff that she endured during her marriage? Did she ever need medication for anxiety or depression? There are so many other things to discuss when talking about situations like this, and these topics are never brought to light in this movie, and it really just settles on the fact that her mom was helpless. To me, that's a bit insulting to victims of domestic abuse. Her mother's character also seems very flat to me because as a survivor of domestic violence, she doesn't come across as a key person to help her own daughter through her future relationships. In fact, in the movie, her mom gushes over RYLE the entire time they're together. I understand that maybe she does want to just bury her feelings and be a little ignorant of the situation. Like, oh, it happened to me, so maybe it won't happen to my daughter. He looks like a great guy on the outside. Maybe it won't be happening behind closed doors. But that's never established as a part of her character. So on the contrary, why isn't she acting more like a protective mama bear about this situation? Like, are you good enough really for my daughter? Why does Lily only have the power when it comes to her daughter in the future? After her father's passing, I thought we would have seen a stronger, or at least more relieved version of her mom. Like really understanding how she's coping with her past and finding the strength to confront her lack of urgency in the past. The story never addresses her growth as a mother or as a survivor. Instead, Lily is the chosen protagonist, the sole heroine to end the cycle of abuse. Now, contrary to her mom, Lily's best friend Allysa is more of a cautionary character. She's not only RYLE's sister, but is Lily's employee at the flower shop, so she really wants to keep a normal working environment and friendship with Lily. I do believe she's written a little bit differently in the book, so just let me know if there's any key points in the book that contrast with the movie depiction of her. In the movie, though, she's very hesitant for RYLE and Lily to get together and encourages them to stay friends. There isn't much weight to this other than the fact that she knows that RYLE is more of a playboy kind of guy. He's non-committal. Alyssa's character is mainly there for laughs and comic relief, and it isn't until Lily finally escapes her relationship with RYLE that Alyssa's character has a little bit more staying power. She reveals the untimely demise of their eldest brother at the hand of RYLE with an unsecured firearm. Even though they were children at the time, RYLE never truly faced this inner demon of his and has a difficult time controlling his outbursts, which I think is supposed to explain his change in behavior towards Lily. And that being said, Allysa had no idea the whole time they were together that her brother could have been capable of doing these things to Lily. She gives a line reminiscent of Pride and Prejudice and supports Lily's decision to leave her brother. I'll say she was probably my favorite character in the movie, but she was kind of a shitty friend up until that point. Moving into the main three characters, RYLE, Lily, and Atlas, we're going to take a look into them based on who I think is least problematic to most problematic, but there's an asterisk on that because they're all pretty terrible. They're all bad characters. So let's start with Atlas. Okay, so we know that Atlas is Lily's high school boyfriend, right? And they had trauma bonded over their similar situations. I mentioned briefly that Atlas did end up getting kicked out of his house due to the severity of the domestic violence in his household. And unlike Lily, he was caught in the middle of this violence in his family and has scars to prove it. Atlas ends up living in the abandoned house right next to Lily's, which is how they meet. And Lily helps him by bringing him food, letting him use the amenities in her house, and eventually teaches him about gardening while her parents are at work. Honestly, we love a giving queen, and I feel like these memories are pretty wholesome. And this part plays a significant role later on in the story where Lily is teaching him about gardening because eventually they have a conversation about how trees don't need to be tended to every day because eventually they grow strong enough roots to take care of themselves. This whole root metaphor is played up a lot in the movie. Atlas gives Lily a carved heart as a gift while they're dating, and she eventually gets that same heart tattooed on her collarbone. And for people that don't understand the metaphor, it's just saying that their love is like a tree root, and even though it's not tended to throughout these 15 years, it's still there. I think a lot of people try to relate this metaphor to Lily's characteristics, but we'll get to her in a bit. I don't think she's much of a strong character. So they start their relationship, they're high school lovers, they have sex, and one day while they're getting down and dirty in Lily's bedroom of all places, her violent father comes home and attacks Atlas to the point of hospitalization. And God, I really don't want to get into what I think about the plot itself, but I really just don't understand how this grown-ass man can beat the shit out of a kid and it doesn't matter because he's the mayor or something. Like, what? How did that not become public knowledge? I mean, there were paramedics at her house. They had to have like taken his name in a legal sense to like document him as an inpatient. Do you know what I mean? Even if they passed it off as some kind of like homeless kid breaking and entering, Lily would have testified against that. Do you see what I mean about the lacking depth in this story? The events in the plot just kind of happen because it's convenient for the plot, not because it makes any logical sense. And this is the last time they see each other as kids. Apparently, Atlas joins the military and then he ends up moving back to Boston and opens a restaurant. Remember the root metaphor that we talked about literally 30 seconds ago? Well, his restaurant's name is Root, of course. And just like a pesky little root that won't go away, he's now back in Lily's life. She visits the restaurant and he sees her there, and the reunion scene is a little awkward because we know he knows her and we know she knows him, especially with the Lorde song playing in the background, but he looks very disgruntled when she doesn't say anything to him while they're at the table, which to me, it's weird that she didn't say anything here. Like, it's been 15 years and you're an adult with different priorities now. Why are you being bashful about the guy who took your V card? Especially because he's just talking to you about appetizers that he made. Plus, if she's hesitant because she's feeling uncomfortable or maybe possibly seeing red flags and is scared of RYLE's reaction to knowing about him, doing things in a public space is a safer way to approach situations like this, especially because in this scenario, she's with her mom. She's with her mom and RYLE, and then she meets Atlas at the restaurant. And again, going back to her mom, if her mom could have like snuffed out any kind of red flags from RYLE in this situation, it could have been a way better plot line and character development for her mom. It could have created natural tension that we could see on screen subtly. And, you know, we could, again, use her mom in the plot. But alas, I forget that these stories are written for a particular audience. And one last thing to note about this dinner scene in particular is that Atlas waits until RYLE goes to the bathroom to approach the table and announce his presence to Lily, which we're going to talk about his snake-like tendencies in a bit. Put a pin in that. Anyway, while they're off in the corner talking, because yes, Lily leaves the table to go to the bathroom to talk to Atlas, she gives him her business address and tells him to stop by at some point to buy something for his girlfriend that he says he has. And it's important to note that Atlas lies about having a girlfriend. Great way to be reintroduced to somebody. Atlas is kind of shoved to the side as we watch Lily and RYLE's relationship develop, but after their first incident, they go back to Root, and after a brief interaction at the table that has RYLE, Lily, Allysa, and her boyfriend or husband or whatever, Atlas walks away from the conversation after seeing that Lily has a black eye and that RYLE's hand is all wrapped up, and he follows her into the bathroom in his own restaurant to confront her about her injuries. Not only does he just follow her into the bathroom, but he physically prevents her from leaving, even after she asks multiple times for him to leave her alone. This doesn't seem very appropriate for the owner of a restaurant, but whatever. He then berates her, even though she assures him that it's an accident. Not believing someone you love and blaming them for being a victim is a very strange strategy for this guy. He even goes as far as comparing her to her own mother. When they exit the bathroom together, RYLE is standing there waiting and is baffled that they're in the bathroom together. And despite RYLE being the most violent of the bunch, Atlas is the first to flip out and literally assaults RYLE in his own restaurant in front of all of the guests. He throws the first punch, and I just don't understand how we are supposed to believe that this guy is any different than her her abuser. The double standard for both of these dumb guys is silly. Like, Lily just needs to realize that there are so many more fish in the sea and both of these guys suck. Why do we need Atlas to fight for her? Like, literally, why does he need to do this? I understand that victims of abuse usually cannot get out of situations on their own because they have the rose-tinted glasses on and they can't see the signs of abuse, right? I mean, heck, I've been there myself, but why does another man have to do this for her? Where are the strong women in this story? Why isn't this showing that victims of domestic violence and abuse can have support networks and have friends to help them? I just personally hate that it's a love interest here. You know, another man thinking he knows what's best for Lily. It's so weak. It's so old. It's so played out. And I think this bothers me so much because Alice is so creepy. Remember how Lily gave her address to him the first time she was at the restaurant? Well, he admits later on that he went over there the very next day and he didn't go in because her boyfriend was there. Like, be for real. That is so weird and immature. Why can't they talk like adults? That moment took place before he or we knew that there was anything bad happening between Lily and RYLE, so why couldn't he just talk to them? Why are they being secretive? Why does he want to get her alone? That is not a good sign. He also admits that he drove by her business several times a week. Like, what? Just leave her alone. Move on. Why is this being romanticized? In my opinion, it would be so much better if they could just openly talk like they're 35 years old, but they don't, and it's so weird. Later on, when Lily runs away from RYLE to stay with Atlas, he confesses that as a kid, he went to the abandoned house to ride the sewer slide and he saw Lily in her bedroom window and decided, nah, I'm good. And he tells her that she saved his life. I'm sorry, what? He straight up puts her on the highest pedestal for just standing in her own room, not even knowing that he exists. I mean, yes, you can argue that eventually she did help him out by giving him food and giving him clothes, yada, yada. But for him to have that initial impression and then later on, after she's escaping her abuser, to say that to her is like so fucking weird and manipulative. Overall, I think that Atlas gives kind of like a white savior complex in a way. I know that RYLE isn't outright a minority, but he is of a darker complexion. He has dark eyes, dark hair, dark facial hair. He's a built guy. Maybe that's even to show you like how strong he can be behind closed doors. Meanwhile, we have Atlas, who is like your typical Midwestern man. He's literally just wearing plaid the whole time. I think he's really like the personification of nostalgia in a way. He's like comfort food, like Cracker Barrel, emphasis on the cracker. And what I feel is most concerning about Alice are his intentions. He's coming from a good place on the outside. He wants the best for Lily, but he constantly comes off as desperate and ungenuine. At one point, he actually gets out of his car to come by the shop in person, and he ends their interaction by writing his phone number down and putting it physically in the back of her phone case for an emergency, like whenever she needs it. And mind you, she told him the whole time he was there to leave. When she does run away to him after leaving RYLE, one of the first things he asks her is, what song would you want played at your funeral? And I'm sorry, but the timing of this question is so off-putting. I guess it could be dark humor or something, but what the fuck? Like, this guy just seems like he's stuck in the past. I'm honestly surprised he can even run his own business without falling apart every time he thinks about Lily. He stalks Lily, similar to RYLE, and even professes his love publicly through the article on his restaurant. Like, how is she supposed to respond to this? Why does Alice feel like Lily is obligated to reciprocate his feelings back? When Lily apologizes for RYLE's insult, saying that she wasted her virginity on this guy by saying that it wasn't wasted on him and that she likes him or whatever, Atlas responds by saying, I know, I was there. This guy is exhausting, and he has no personality other than being attached to Lily. Lily. Miss Lily Blossom Bloom. Let's talk about our main girl, our creative, entrepreneurial protagonist, our unreliable storyteller. Wait, what? Yes. As the narrator and main character of the movie and book, Lily tells us that she is an unreliable storyteller. This may seem weird, but the way the story is told through her lens is a very powerful storytelling device. I would argue it's probably the only good thing about this movie. Since Lily is our storyteller, we get to see moments of abuse clearly as accidents to showcase how abusers gaslight and manipulate their victims. This feels super unique compared to other stories that touch on similar subject matter. However, the plot and the characters still fall so flat. We know about Lily's past, how she grew up witnessing abuse, how Atlas is her first and seemingly only boyfriend until she meets RYLE, and now we know that she owns a flower shop in Boston. Despite her struggles growing up, she came out on top and now is a successful small business owner. And you'd think that these characteristics make her feel like more of a developed and strong character, but they really don't. Firstly, I don't think that Lily is very honest with herself and the people around her. At least in the movie, we get no context as to when she moved to Boston or why. Again, the movie ages up the characters by about 10 or 15 years, so there's a huge gap in the story that never gets filled. Putting context clues together, we can figure out that she moved to Boston because that was the place that Atlas had mentioned one time in the past as a city that he really likes. So maybe we're thinking that she wanted to try it out too. Maybe even in the hopes of seeing him again, but we as the audience have no idea. And this whole leaves room to consider that Lily isn't honest with herself about why she started a business in Boston. Like, why there of all places? After she finds out that Atlas is in town again, why are they sneaking off to the bathroom at his restaurant just to have a conversation? Why can't they publicly talk or just be friends? The lack of maturity from her character is so overwhelming, especially when you consider how selfish Lily is. At the start of the movie, she makes out with this guy that she barely met, that she knows is a womanizer, and when she claims to be a serious relation kind of gal, she continuously flirts and goes out of her way to lead RYLE on. As they're dating, most conversations between her and RYLE start with her talking about her feelings, her wants, her needs, before even considering how RYLE feels. Even in group settings like the bar or at the restaurant, she constantly zones out of conversations with other people just to daydream about Atlas. And it just seems like she's not paying attention to any of the people she's actually with. And I know this might be nitpicking, but we previously saw her go out of her way to help Atlas survive, which shows this nurturing part of her character, but that is never explored again as an adult. She really comes across as more self-absorbed than anything, and it all stems from lack of communication on her part. And I wouldn't say she's flat out lying to people, but she is very indirect when it comes to talking about most things. For example, going back to the scenario where she meets Atlas again as an adult, she doesn't tell her mom that it's him. She doesn't tell her boyfriend who he is, even though they just started dating and it really shouldn't be that big of a deal. When RYLE finds Atlas's phone number stuffed into her phone case, she doesn't really communicate that it didn't mean anything or that she forgot to throw it away, etc. Even though during the scene when Atlas gave it to her, she wanted nothing to do with him. When RYLE is outside of the bathroom bathroom and catches her coming out of said bathroom with Atlas. She also takes no responsibility for this, even though moments before she literally left the table just to go talk to him. I feel like the movie is trying its gosh darn best to convince us that she needs to choose between these two losers, but to me it feels inconsistent and incoherent. And on the note of these two losers, I'm sorry, but I just can't believe that these are the only two people in her life, especially because they age her up so much in the movie. She had no other relationships, not even any other friends. This is not giving strong, independent women. This feels super 2008, dare I say 2000 and late. I understand that birds of a feather flock together, but why do we need a man to solve her problems? Why does she even want to be around men if she had an abusive father? Where are her friends? Where is her mom? It just feels so flat, like there's just a story and it happens. You can be a victim and a survivor and still have some kind of support system. Trauma is complex. Relationships are complex. Every person in this movie gives off a flat representation of people involved in abuse. And I guess she's a little redeemed by the end of the movie, because after she gives birth, she confronts RYLE and demands a divorce, which I just want to say is crazy that she hands her baby to a violent man right before telling him this. I don't know if I would have done that. And so it looks like she's ending the cycle of abuse. Good for her. I'm seriously happy for her. In this scene, she stands her ground and she talks about all of the different ways that he abused her and creates a scenario for him to think about somebody doing that to his daughter, which I think is very powerful. She not only illustrates the awful abuse perpetrated onto her, but she also allows RYLE a platform to deliver the message of the movie to the audience. And by finally speaking her mind in this scene, we see her as more of a strong, developed character. She ends their conversation by saying the title of the movie, and that would have been a really great place to cut to the credits, but no. We skip time and we see that she meets up with Atlas again in a park, and after admitting that she is single, she asks if he is seeing anybody, and he replies, "No, not yet." What is wrong with these people? I swear they deserve each other. Lily and Alice deserve each other. My God. Even though my disdain for Lily and Alice are quite apparent, it doesn't excuse any of the actions of this character. Let's talk about Mr. RYLE Kincaid. He is a successful, rich neurosurgeon living in Boston. And in the book, I believe he's supposed to be a bit older than Lily to give us that classic power imbalance that we love to see in any relationship. After finding out that his sister works at Lily's flower shop, RYLE persistently pursues Lily, even though she denies him a casual fling because she wants a committed relationship. Acting like a sex pest isn't necessarily a crime. However, I think the movie does a really poor job at emphasizing these red flags, and you could even argue that it romanticizes it quite a bit. Men, if a woman tells you she doesn't want to be with you, that does not mean play hard to get. It means leave her alone. Not respecting boundaries is negative aura. I don't make the rules. In this story, though, the womanizer RYLE likes Lily so much that he changes and agrees to date her exclusively, which halts his hookup ways and puts him on a more traditional path. This is notable because we learn from his sister that RYLE has never been in a relationship before. Now, I don't think that the naivety of RYLE not being in a relationship before justifies any of his actions, but I do think the narrative of I can change him really influences Lily in this situation. As mentioned before, he strays away from deeper relationships because of his incident that he had killing his brother as a child, which caused caused him issues in opening up to people and getting close to them again. And Lily doesn't even find out about this trauma until about a year or so into their relationship. Again, the timing in this movie makes no sense, but at one point his sister gets pregnant, so like at least a couple months have passed or something. And Lily doesn't learn this from RYLE himself. She learns it from Allysa. And this just proves that they don't communicate. Like, what does Lily even like about this guy other than he's a shredded neurosurgeon? If you can't talk about your trauma or just talk to each other like adults, why are you in the relationship? Even one time she admits to him that she grew up with domestic violence in her household, and she tells him that that's something people don't talk about. I don't know about you, that's all my friends talk about. All their trauma. Like, that is something that friends do on a basic level, is talk about their problems. Despite their lack of openness, at least the actors have pretty good chemistry on screen. Altogether, RYLE seems like a very normal guy outside of his relationship with Lily. He excels at his job. He has at least one friend, I guess. He has a good relationship with his sister, and he gets laid all the time with no strings attached and no issues there. And on that note, when they first start seeing each other, Lily tells him that she doesn't want to have sex because they're not in a committed relationship. And in the movie, RYLE respects that boundary, and instead they just get ready for bed and they cuddle and it's normal, as if he's willing to respect her boundaries. But please let me know if there's something in the book that makes this more malicious. I feel like I remember hearing something that she sees him lock the door and keeps her in the room against her will, perhaps. Something like that. But in the movie, it comes across very consensual. I was really surprised, especially going into like the progression of his character, like developing him as an abuser, especially the sexual abuse that comes later on in the movie. This scene made future abuse seem like it came out of the blue, and it didn't show us any kind of foreshadowing. And this makes RYLE seem more like a one-dimensional character because he ends up only doing bad things when he needs to fill the villain role. After the plot twist that Lily was misremembering everything because she was gaslit into thinking that all the abuse was just happy little accidents, we are able to analyze RYLE's motivations a little bit more critically. Some red flags that do pop up when RYLE is on screen is him throwing a chair when they first meet, him constantly pestering her and nagging her to sleep with him, him inserting himself into plans she already had with her mother, him proposing to her during her sister's big moment of giving birth to steal the spotlight, and constantly running away from their arguments as an emotional wreck instead of sitting down and communicating with Lily. These can all be considered forms of manipulation and are often ignored in toxic relationships. And maybe this is because the movie is told through Lily's perspective and she has these rose-colored glasses on, so she thinks, and therefore we think, that his behavior is normal, which is super intriguing from a film standpoint, but I'm not getting anything else from this movie to hold this to be true, which ultimately is very disappointing given the subject matter here. Besides the hypocrisy of Alice and Lily, let's dive into RYLE's red flags. Throughout the movie, we're given some context clues for RYLE's sudden outbursts, which could explain what he was feeling when we initially see him on the rooftop where him and Lily meet. We know that he witnessed and caused the death of his older brother as a child, and we're seeing this vulnerable state progress as an adult after he loses a child patient. Now, this is an extremely delicate case. Can I blame him for being visibly upset after such a similar incident? No, not really. I mean, that's an awful thing to experience, especially in your profession. But the framing of this scene played out really weirdly. We know that both RYLE and Lily are in broken places in this moment, and yet they decide to make out at the top of the roof. It's just weird because RYLE goes from unstable guy directly into smooth, suave womanizer. And the weird thing is that the movie is in Lily's perspective, right? right? I think if they wanted us to understand that he's a manipulator, they should have shown him lying a little bit more, or maybe even seeing him a little bit unattached to his feelings in certain scenarios. Like, give me examples of RYLE using his sexual desires to get out of difficult conversations as a way to cope. Show him as a narcissist that denies or deflects responsibility. Let's take the second red flag that we see. RYLE constantly chasing Lily to pursue her sexually. But when we're back at the flower shop in one scene and RYLE buys flowers for his crush, we can visibly see Lily get jealous of this interaction. And then at Alyssa's party, she again zones out of conversations just to look at him talk to another woman. She then passes by him while taking off her jacket just to catch his attention, which works. And I mean, I love a confident woman, but this just doesn't seem to match up with the characters or the message of the film. Like, yes, he is harassing her, and it's absolutely ridiculous that a grown-ass man feels like a woman is obligated to sleep with him, but that's not really what we're being shown in the movie. What we see is that he's kind of respectful when she denies him sex that first night and they fall asleep together. Again, showing that Lily can change him. Even in casual hookups, do you know how scary it is to refuse somebody sex? Again, if they wanted to be a little bit more realistic, Lily could have remembered him locking the door or throwing a fit to try to manipulate her to go further than what her boundary is. I believe it's different in the book, but in the movie, it totally misses the mark on this. Like most abusers, RYLE has a narcissistic type nature, so show that. I don't want to be empathetic towards him just because I know he has suppressed trauma. I don't want to give an inch of an excuse for men like this. His emotions seem to flip like a switch, which is a clear sign of mental instability, maybe even a personality disorder. And of course, you can argue that abusive people are under emotional distress, but it seems like such a strange scapegoat for this plot particularly. If this film is bringing awareness to domestic violence, then keep it about that. There's a reason why they never focused on financial issues and everyone's living in luxury apartments and can afford the rent at their flower shop, etc. It's because they want to focus on the drama of it all. So do that. Another red flag and a form of manipulation that RYLE uses is running away from the problems in hopes that Lily chases after him. But in the two instances that we see him do this in the movie, Lily explains to him that Alice meant nothing to her, but it's an extremely apparent lie. Why not have her be the only reasonable person and have her communicate things clearly and show RYLE as the irrational one? The gaslighting twist almost destroys the narrative because we already know that it's Lily's perspective, but the movie doesn't make RYLE seem completely manipulative after the fact that we know that he's bad. His violence and manipulation toward her is unforgivable, and I would have liked to see a little bit more tension build up in the movie to show us as the audience his malintent from the beginning. Ultimately, it just feels like these characters are all disjointed and they add no depth to the severity of the story. Colleen Hoover and the writers of this movie try to convolute things with a bunch of problems, but they end up only addressing singular issues. I understand how abuse can feel in a toxic relationship, and I respect her decision to bring this subject matter to light. The film and book probably resonate with a lot of people who are hopefully understanding their own personal relationship with these themes. Overall, I think the movie and potentially the book do a good job of bringing up the topics for discussion, but it falls short because it doesn't ever make an attempt to actually combat these issues. Like, how is Lily processing her trauma? Why is Atlas her sole solution? How are we supposed to trust RYLE with joint custody or any of his future relationships? These are all questions that go unanswered because the story fails to resolve these complex ideas. Instead, we're left with another middle-aged white woman Lifetime movie disguised as a rom-com you wear your florals to. But let me know. Have you seen the movie? Did you read the book? Did you like any of it? Did you enjoy this video? Have you watched until the end? I don't know. Sorry this video was so long, but I appreciate you sticking through. Hopefully you're done with all of your chores or your lunch hour. I will see you all in the next one.